waiting on Carrie. Julia is still away. Shoot. Curtis, I can hear the music playing in your head right now.
That's terrifying. It's actually just the screams of middle schoolers.
Oh boy. Carrie.
Only 2 more days for me.
Wow. Great. Joe, are we waiting from anybody else on your end?
Not a soul, only me.
Okay. And we can get going. I'd like to call the Mount Greylock Regional School Committee to order. It is Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. It is 5:01 p.m. We are meeting remotely via Zoom. It is not on the agenda, but the meeting is being cast on WillieNet TV channel 1302 and will be posted within 24 hours of the meeting's completion on the Mount Greylock Regional School District YouTube channel and on WillieNet TV. Whatever their URL is. Joe might know better than I do, but it'll be posted on their website as well. If we could call the roll alphabetically by last name, I will say that Julia is absent today and I am here.
Green here.
Elfenbein here.
Green here. Malloy here.
Miller here.
Thank you. At Mount Greylock Regional School District, our mission is to create a community of learners working together in a safe and challenging learning environment that encourages restorative-based processes, respect, inclusive diversity, courtesy, integrity, and responsibility through high expectations and cooperation, resulting in lifelong learning and personal growth. So the one and only agenda item other than what we just did is discussion and consideration of additional funding for Latin at Mount Greylock Regional School District. Steve, I see your hand up.
So I'm happy to make a motion just so we have something on the table to discuss. So I move we take, I think it was said to be 65,000, but something in that ballpark from school choice and excess and deficiency to keep Latin at the level it is right now, as well as commit to any student who signs up for Latin 1 this year that we will continue and have Latin AP available for them, but at this time not commit to having Latin AP available to anybody who signs up in 2 years.
Before that's seconded, Steve, can I just suggest an amendment?
Sure.
Because it's not school choice and E&D, it's school choice and tuition that the funds would come out of. E&D requires a special town meeting. Thank you.
Perfect. Yep. Happy to take that change. And the reason I think it's very important that we commit to anybody who signs up this year being able to get to AP Latin is if we don't do this, it's going to be a very difficult conversation and decision for a lot of people as to do they want to risk this. And so I think we should be committing to the incoming class making it through, but not committing at this time to the class after that. Thank you.
Okay,
Just
Steve, Joe,
one point of clarification on that. Latin 1 would be at the high school level. Latin 7 and Latin 8 would be the middle school. So
Okay.
I'm not sure whether the motion was it sounded as though it was
No,
intended to imply that.
It was meant to apply to the 7th and 8th graders. So I apologize.
So in other words,
Anybody
anybody who
who-
initiates Latin in this coming year,
Yes,
if the school committee would be pledging to keeping the Latin program through allowing any of those students to complete the AP Latin cycle.
correct. And at this time, we would not be committing to anybody who would sign up in 2 years. We may be able to do that. We may decide not to. But I think we should have a focused motion on what we want to do so that people can make decisions with enough information right now so that they can plan. I know a lot of people are worried because you need 3 years of language and it has to be the same language for
So
some
before we
schools.
go into discussion on
Sure,
this, the motion hasn't yet been seconded.
I'll second Steve.
Ursula seconds. Discussion, Steve,
No, I was just saying, I think it's important for people to have some stability in planning, but to recognize that Latin is not the only issue we have in our school, that we have to really look at everything to see, are we allocating our resources the way we want to? But we need to give some stability so people can make informed decisions.
Jose,
Thank you, Christina, and thank you, Stephen, for your motion. I just want to, just from my perspective, highlight what I think are two distinct issues. The first is the process by which this decision was originally conveyed, in response to addressing effectively an emergency deficit in our upcoming, budget for fiscal year 25. I think, this is just my opinion here, that any curricular decisions that we face as a district really does need to involve our school councils, our parents and caregivers, our students, and our community members. And the manner by which this decision was made prevented any consultation, any discussion, any consideration of our situation and the curricular offerings that we have within our district. Because we have, thanks be to the access to tuition and school choice funds, we have the ability this year to plug that hole within our budget without affecting our curricular offerings or the programming that we provide within the district. I'm very much in support of accessing and utilizing those funds. I do think any conversation we have regarding curricular offerings, whether they be Latin, whether they be physics, whether they be PE, that's a separate conversation completely. And I think, and I hope that you all share that opinion. It could be that in upcoming years, via our school councils or via our budget process, we are faced with choices that we have to make, but making those choices without consultation with community members, school councils, parents, caregivers, students, it's just not the way to do it. Thanks.
Carrie,
Thanks, Christina. I'll just offer a counterpoint to that. So as Jose said, a curricular decision of this magnitude would typically come through school governance council during the budgeting process. And it would have been incorporated into the budget discussions prior to any votes by this committee or by the towns. Instead, it was, and I would argue, a responsible administrative decision based on budget constraints, contract goals, teacher workload, ongoing scheduling issues, and enrollment data. The decision to move forward with phase reduction was within the budget priorities the administration outlined in the budget presentations, as we have seen from the packet documents. Keeping one Latin FTE for what was 57 students last year and would have been 43 students this coming year requires that the 3 teachers who are teaching the rest of our students taking Spanish each teach additional classes. It is difficult to justify resources for a single teacher while already overtaxing our Spanish teachers. So we've had concern about how the reduction in Latin would overtax our Spanish teachers, but we're already in this situation. One Latin FTE forces 3 extended contracts in Spanish. Or put another way, we need 3.6 Spanish FTE with only 3 instructors in order to provide 1 FTE of Latin. That's the $65,000 we're talking about, is 3 extended contracts and the administrative and guidance work that is going to require in order to reverse course right now. By reducing the Latin instruction to 0.8 FTE and adding a 0.2 in Spanish, we eliminate the need for extended contracts, and this was the plan. We also reduce scheduling conflicts significantly around Latin being a very difficult subject to schedule around for all of our students who take Latin. The bottom line is that we have limited resources and our student needs are changing. We have increased need for reading and math support, school psychologists and social workers, training for our faculty and our community in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and the list goes on. Only 10% of our students take Latin. Only 8 students requested Latin for next year, and only 10 students were planning to take Latin in 8th grade. And this is prior to discussion of any reduction in the Latin program. And on a strictly financial level, you may recall, I proposed a percentage increase to our member towns last April in order to reduce the amount we took from reserves. Somewhat ironically, the amount we preserved in E&D was $70,000. So we're talking about now spending from reserves what we had asked our towns to prevent us from needing to spend. Different source of reserve, but similar amount. Despite this, despite saving that $70,000, we have still used 1/3 of our available reserves to support the FY25 budget. Taking an additional $65,000 out of school choice or tuition funds brings us that much closer to where we will need to draw on E&D, which requires a special town meeting. I just ask, is the committee confident that this is where we should be prioritizing our funding for this coming year? I understand the issues around process. I also understand the administrative decision-making process. And more importantly, I speak with a finance subcommittee chair hat on. I very much support the study of Latin. I'm not sure we can justify it in the budget for this coming year.
Thank you, Carrie. Jose, I saw your hand up next, and then Steve.
Thanks, Christina, and thank you, Carrie, for that very well thought out, statement that you shared with us. I would say that much of what you shared with us, those are real challenges that we face, that perhaps this particular course faces. But it speaks to the great need for our community to have time to engage in these deliberations, a time to assess what we value and how best we can effectively finance what we value. And the way the process planned out short-circuited any of those deliberations. By utilizing the funding that is available, right, for these purposes. It allows us as a community not just to have the conversation about Latin, but to have a really important conversation about how much we value our public schools. For 2 years now, we have asked the minimum of our member towns. We have tried our best to minimize our ask of our towns. And now I think it's time for us to have a real conversation about what our towns are willing to do to support a school district that is truly inclusive and effectual for every student in our district. Thanks.
Steve?
So in one word, ditto. And then to expand that out a little bit, I think this is a special situation. I understand the financial complications, and this is why I'm only proposing that we pledge that the students who start next year will be able to make it to AP Latin, and that gives us time to engage with the towns and figure out just what we want to do. One thing that I think is worth remembering is we've talked a lot about some other priorities of the school where it's hard to point to how effective is this. Well, Latin has gone through a lot over the past couple of years, and it's very tough with this lack of stability for people to decide to commit to it. The other thing is people are watching and they're trying to decide where do they want to move, where do they want to send their kids. And when you see schools retreating from academic disciplines, when you see schools trimming the offerings, people often vote with their feet. We've lost families over the years, and this sends a signal. And so I would like to send another type of signal, and I would like to preserve for the next class, but only at this point promise for the next class will we have the longer conversation that Jose has so correctly said we need to have. We need to really think about how all the pieces fit together and see how do we want to allocate things. And so I'd like just, the clean motion, let's restore it. We have the funds. That's what these funds are there for. That's why we have them. Let's use them this year. We're not going to do a 10-year commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Carrie, I echo pretty much everything you were saying. I would love to preserve the Latin program. I'm seeing the same data that you're seeing when we look at the information, the hard information we're getting. We as a committee sat through all of the planning for the budgeting. We always welcome our town members to come to those meetings and to participate. We have school council participation. So I don't think the process is broken. I think we followed the process. I think there's always going to be exceptional things that happen in the course of any community, especially in small, unique communities like we have. We are seeing families come in and we're seeing families go. That's the nature of the beast. And I am struggling very much with this. I have read all of the passionate emails from community members near and far. And so this is a tough one. Curtis?
I'm looking at the budget excerpt that is a part of the packet, and I'm looking at the total operating capital assessments that were asked of the two towns at a 3.38% increase for Lanesboro and a 3.9% increase for Williamstown. And just because I'm a math teacher in mid-June, I'm struggling to do the math on what the change in ask would have been. And it's academic, pardon the pun at this point, but what would the change have been to have included this 65 and change in the original? You know what I'm saying? Or almost saying? Because I hate that there's I hate that this is a choice that we have to make, and I feel like if we could travel back in time, we might have asked for a slight percentage higher, but that only would have put this choice off a year. And when we look at the forecasted numbers from potentially from the state and from tuition and choice for next year, it's not the prettiest picture in the world. But Joe, do you have some idea on that, or you're doing it? While Joe is doing math, I probably should have done it instead of asking this question. It is clear to me that every single member of the school committee sees, understands, and appreciates the value that Latin provides to our district, to the curriculum as a whole. The number of other curriculum parts that touch on Latin throughout high school is sizable. And I feel like it's a program that should be robust and well attended, heavily enrolled as it used to be. But when I look at the enrollment data that was also part of the packet, I was confused by all the zeros for Latin 1 from 2015 to 2020, and I feel like we touched on that somewhere in the previous meeting, but I can't remember what the explanation was of having no one enrolled in Latin 1 for those 5 years, but somehow having people in Latin 2. I don't know if I'm just reading it wrong or what. So there's 2 questions.
So the answer to the first one is it would have increased each of the 2 budgets by 0.3%, or each of the assessments by 0.3%. In terms of, I believe the response is that students were previously transiting from Latin 8 to what was effectively Latin 2, but I am not 100% sure of that. As it's never a question that I've needed to answer before, and I'm reaching way back in my memory for things that I've heard, but it so far predates me that I can't guarantee that answer.
That jives with some peripheral understanding I was just granted. So thank you for that. That would bring the ask for the 2 sending towns to 3.68 for Lanesboro and 4.2% for Williamstown. And again, that would be well above what we were asked to bring in by both towns' boards of finance, and would only again solve the problem for this year. And the issue is, like, I want to say yes, let's fund it for this year, but I struggle to see where the miracle comes from for the following years. Which is why if we are going to move forward with something, the way that Steve proposed it, of just a commitment to this year and through, if we're proposing anything, that makes sense. But having the rolling enrollment for year after year, I don't see how we could even offer that as a concept right now, looking at the numbers we have.
And Curtis, just to clarify, you're talking about hypotheticals. We're not going back to the towns and increasing the percentage increase. We're not talking about doing that, because I know there was some confusion around that.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that the people don't think we're doing that.
Academic in terms of where we would be now if we had, type of thing. Thank you for clarifying.
Steve, I think I saw your hand next.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Curtis was asking. I think what we need is a Band-Aid for this year to give us time to look at the entire curriculum, the entire school. And this gives us time. If you start doing something like this and you kill the students who are coming in, you've effectively killed the Latin program and there's no going back. It's going to be very, very hard to restart something. If we do this, we keep it viable. It buys us time. We have the reserves. That's why we have them. And we can start trying to explore other solutions. You know, I am a professor. I have taught students remotely, where I occasionally go and visit them. You know, we may need to be a little bit creative in terms of thinking how to do things and sharing resources with other schools. Let's just do this tonight. Let's give us the time to investigate.
Jose?
Thank you, Christina. And we'll just second much of what Steve just shared. So I'll keep my comments brief. You know, I think, you know, the questions that you were posing, Curtis, are all important questions to ask. But again, just a second, Stephen, we need time. We need data. We need an opportunity to, you know, to converse, to be in conversation with each other. Joe, I was hoping if you could elucidate for those of us that are here who might be watching at home and might watch later, could you explain to us the process by which Latin in this particular decision was identified as the way to plug our deficit going into fiscal year 25?
I can explain parts of it because I was not involved in much of it, but to summarize, as we presented the budget in March, we had a number of planned retirements and departures that did not materialize. So we were left with a hole there that we needed to fill. The conversation turned to what areas within staffing, as we've spent the last, let me see, I've been here for 4 years. We've spent the last 4 years trying to squeeze every bit out of the non-staff side of our budget that we can to make room for staffing. So we went through that exercise very publicly for 4 years. So at that point this year, we needed to turn to the staff question. As we looked at that, there are certainly services that the school provides around in other areas, social workers in particular, where there is a conversation around can we maintain that level of support, and so that was one area. Latin was the area where we have seen declining enrollment for years, not just a 1-year blip or a 2-year blip. Typically, a teacher within our district serves about 100 to 125 students over the course of their school year. Latin was the one area where a teacher was serving students and numbering in the 40s and 50s total, which led us down that path of taking a look at what would it do in terms of the current fiscal year, as well as in future fiscal years, if that was the program that we were to phase out. At that point, I was not involved in the discussions around the details of that until it came back to calculating the numbers. We have been in a situation where, as Spanish enrollment has increased significantly over the years, we have needed to increase class sizes as well as produce what are called extended contracts for Spanish teachers, where they pick up teaching an additional course beyond the typical course load for a teacher at the school. A decision like this one would allow us to not need to go that route, hence the savings. And it also, in the conversation around scheduling, the challenge when you have any subject where there is only one section of a given class is that then the rest of the schedule needs to some extent revolve around that. So if a student is in a certain level of Latin, then that triggers the rest of the schedule needing to revolve around how that course can be offered with the single teacher, with the single section. And that creates scheduling inflexibility that leads to, in some situations, other courses that we are required or do offer with higher enrollment to be split into multiple sections artificially, just to be able to schedule around that. And that is what we also looked at in the longer term, as far as creating more flexibility as we navigate what will probably be 2 or 3 or 4 years of challenging budget environments. I think that addressed your question, but
Thank you, Joe.
I don't have all the details.
I just have just a really brief follow-up, if that's okay.
We're good.
Joe, you said that you weren't involved directly in the decision that was made. Could you tell us who was involved and provide some indication of a record of conversations that took place?
I believe the folks involved were the superintendent, the principal, the guidance office, looking at schedules and looking at impact. And then that gradually worked its way out to department heads and other people who would be involved in the implications of such a decision.
Thank you.
Ursula?
Okay, hi everyone. I wasn't at the school committee meeting last week, so I didn't hear all the discussion on this topic, but I have read all the emails that have come in, and I appreciate everyone's point of view. I just wanted to share my position, which is that I'm very torn between my finance committee hat and the fiscal responsibility that we obviously have to have. And the desire that, we could have all the money that we want for everything all the time, with unlimited budget. But I do think that after giving this a lot of thought, my position is that I like Steve's position of funding this, committing to fund this for the year and the incoming students, and taking a more holistic look at, what we should or should not fund in the future. I hate to think of just cutting it. I don't want to say hastily, because I'm sure that wasn't the case, but the way it seems to folks. And so I'd like to agree with funding it for this year, committing to fund it for the children that are in the classes, and take another look next year at what we should do in the long term. So.
Thank you, Ursula.
Yep.
Carrie?
Yeah, I just want to add another couple of fun facts about our changing population and who is actually teaching Latin at this point. About 26% of school districts in Massachusetts offer Latin. Of the top 50 school districts ranked by places like US News, 80% of those schools offer Latin. Latin is, we've heard from lots of folks, and I also appreciate all of the positive feedback and support for the study of Latin and the classics. But the demographics in our districts, the demographics in our district, they're changing. And the demand for Spanish is not just about not wanting to take Latin. It's about wanting to have a spoken world language. And so I don't expect the demand for Spanish will go down. And the way we're going to have to accommodate that is to either hire another Spanish teacher, which we cannot afford to do, or to repurpose a teacher who is teaching half the number of students as most other teachers in the school. It's just an unfortunate fact of what we are facing. So I am not going to support another year of the program. And it is not because I don't value the study of Latin. And I hope that people don't think that. It is strictly practical, financial, and realistic, I think, position on my part about where we are now and where we're moving as a district. So I do have another meeting that I'm supposed to get to, so I may not actually record my vote unless we take it soon.
Yes.
But I just wanted to.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Carrie. And I do echo that. And I think there are other people that need to leave soon too. I would like to point out again that we last year had 300 Spanish students and 58 Latin students. And I can't help but wonder at what detriment this would do to the proportion of our Spanish students. I want Latin for the students who are here for sure. This is a very, very difficult position we're in. I don't like it. I wish we weren't here. But I do like that fiscal responsibility is just, it's knocking so loudly at my door.
Mm-hmm. And Christina, it was 350 Spanish students, not 300.
Oh, wow.
350
Okay.
with 3 teachers. Yeah.
So I think about the teachers too, and the impact on them. Joe?
One thing that I caution you with the motion that's on the floor is that you would be placing Latin into a position that no other subject is in terms of being protected for many years. And if you're faced with a couple $100,000 in budget deficit, to somehow have taken Latin off of the discussion table that should be happening at the school council level, I don't I don't understand how that decision would be responsible, but that's the one.
No, I
thing I want
find
to-
it very irresponsible, actually.
Well,
So
can I
even if you
respond
support a
to that as
year,
the person who made the motion? I think it's the only, I think it's the only responsible thing we can do, because this was sprung on the communities without giving them adequate time to respond and discuss and debate. So if I was a parent of a 7th grader, I would be very hesitant of signing them up for Latin after what happened this year without some firm commitment that they will be able to proceed. That's why I think it's the responsible thing right now to do it this way. I know people have to leave. I would like to call to question. And I'll just say one last quick comment. What do we do about people who are native Spanish speakers? What do they do for their language? To be a one language school is dangerous. I don't know if Latin should be that second language. This is a conversation we need to have. This is the only thing we can do right now to keep the Latin program viable and give us that time to figure out what we need to do. And we need to buy time right now. And we fortunately have the money for the purchase. So I will call to question.
Okay, we have a motion by Steve that's been seconded by Ursula.
well,
Uh,
now we have to vote on this calling the question. That requires a vote. And
Why-
it requires a second and a vote to end the discussion.
I just don't want to have the vote taken after people have to leave the meeting for other
So,
commitments.
Okay, then
That's why.
withdraw your call to question and we can move to a vote.
yeah.
Sure.
Great.
Okay.
I withdraw that.
Okay, we have a motion by Steve, seconded by Ursula. All in favor, alphabetically by last name. Conry, no.
Constantine, I.
Elfenbein, I.
Green, regrettably nay.
Malloy, I.
Miller, I.
Okay, that motion passes 4 in favor, 2 against. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to make it
Just as
easy for
a-
the,
Before you do that, for everybody, a quick administrative note. So the team at Mount Greylock is prepared to, guidance counselors are going to get back in. They are going to reach out to families and let them know of the school committee decision and go through a process of rescheduling for all students. That should be happening pretty quickly here so that we can try to get all the rest of the ducks in a row for this coming school year. So all of that will be happening here as quickly as we can.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, Steve made a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Conry, aye.
Constantine, I.
Elfenbein, I.
Green, aye.
Malloy, I.
Miller, I.
Thank you. It is 5:37 and we are adjourned.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
night.
Thank you. Take care.